The TD Niagara Jazz Festival presents Niagara Summer Mardi Gras Sessions. Join us online every Tuesday from 6 to 7 p.m. as we bring new Orleans to the north. Direct from the Crescent City, Dancin' Man 504, Windex Pete, Christopher Butcher of the Heavyweights Brass Band, and more. Featuring mask making, Cajun cooking demos, musical spoons, second line dance steps, cocktail demos, funky fashion tips, and musical clips. Tune in for these free sessions on our Facebook or YouTube channels, Jazz Niagara. Then we'll celebrate Niagara Summer Mardi Gras together this summer on July 18th. It's virtually possible. Just watch and see.
Niagara's Summer Mardi Gras sessions are brought to you in part by TD, the City of St. Catharines, and the town of Niagara-on-the-Lake.
Hello everybody, my name is Witchdoctor Utu, and I will be the guest this Tuesday night for the Niagara Jazz Festival's Mardi Gras Summer Series. The topic I'll be discussing, voodoo. You might be wondering, what would a person from Niagara be doing talking about New Orleans voodoo? Well, I've been a member of the New Orleans Voodoo Spiritual Temple for 20 years. I perform as a drummer in the city on a regular basis. I've written a book on the topic of voodoo, and I'm looking very forward to sharing a lot of interesting tidbits about just how crucial the music and drum culture of New Orleans has been to affect the entire pop culture of the world. So, voodoo, drumming, and the fight for freedom, all will be covered in my topic this Tuesday, and I'm looking very forward to it. So till then, much love, best of blessings.
Good evening, Juliet Dunn here. How's everyone doing this evening? It's hot and it's balmy here in Niagara in St. Catharines. I'm not sure where you're watching from, but it feels like we're in New Orleans. We're truly channeling New Orleans for this evening, and we're very excited to do so. Wow, I'm so excited to find out more from our guest for this evening. A subject, you know, it's interesting. The word jazz is kind of has a stigma attached. A lot of people have certain views of what jazz is. So does the word voodoo and witch doctor. So I think this will be really interesting for our guest to demystify what we maybe think of those two words. His name is Witchdoctor Utu. He's an author, and he's the founder of the Dragon Ritual Drummers, and we'll be hearing some of their music throughout the show. You also heard some of their music underlying the video clips earlier. So the founder of the Dragon Ritual Drummers, the Niagara Voodoo Shrine, and he's a member of the New Orleans Voodoo Spiritual Temple, which I'm sure he's going to tell us more about. For the last 18 years, he's been immersed in the rootwork, conjure, and mysticism surrounding the lore and legacy of the Underground Railroad, living here in St. Catharines, Ontario, where Harriet Mama Moses Tubman brought her track to the end. The Underground Railroad right here. And he has been upfront and integral over the past decade by continuing to uplift and elevate the spirit of Mama Moses and her surrounding spiritual court. So let's bring on our guest for this evening, Witchdoctor Utu. And here he is. Hello, Utu. How are you this evening?
Hello, I'm doing fantastic.
Wow, it's hot and balmy.
Just like you said, we're getting New Orleans weather.
Totally channeling it in for your session. So, oh my gosh, so many questions. I don't even know where to start, but let's start with you. And I believe you said you were born Scottish roots. Is that right?
Yeah, I was born in Scotland, of all places, but I grew up since a little child right in Toronto. But I've been living in Niagara for about 30 years now.
30 years. So how old were you when you left Scotland with your family to go to Toronto?
Well, 2 years old. Little baby.
Okay, right. So no accent. Like myself, I was 5 when we left.
Only when I had a few beers.
Yeah, right. So then Toronto from age 2 until what age?
About, like early 20s.
Early 20s. And then what brought you to Niagara?
Came to go to Brock University, actually, when to attend school. And once I got here, I knew I had found my place with a lot more nature and the 2 lakes on either side. And and the escarpment. So I fell in love with it and just decided to call this my home.
Very nice, very nice. And so, what did you study at Brock? Was it music and drumming right away, or?
No, I was taking general arts. That's all it was. It was just a chance to get out of town and go to school.
Right. So the art, just the art, but already you were involved in the arts from the get-go.
Yeah, music was part of some of the courses, but it was mostly theory and things like that. But I was already a drummer at that point, but I'm not, all kinds of drums. I was already playing a lot of drums since I was young.
Right. So what was, so your first experience with drums, would you say was what age?
Like 4 years old.
4 years old.
So my father was a drummer in a Scottish marching band. They stayed really tight with their culture, so it's not uncommon to have children grow up in these bands. They wear the same uniform, and they learn to play the triangle and the cymbals, and then you work your way up. And so, I was always surrounded by it. I thought I was a really, really avid drummer, and so that was from very, very young. I was already, chasing the rhythms.
Right. And so in your family, were you an only child, or were there other siblings also into the music as well?
No, I was the only child.
So you'd go to your dad's gigs, or how did that work?
Yeah. I mean, they played mostly in parades or Scottish or British cultural events, throughout Toronto and Ontario. So they had their own bus. We travel on a bus somewhere to go perform with all these other Scottish bands. So yeah, a lot of crazy times. Bus full of Scottish musicians is never going to be boring.
Wow, I'm sure you've got stories from those days. So you were telling me earlier when we were just checking the sound, and that's where it all kind of began. So it started with the drumming.
Yeah. For me to enter into the traditions that I did was, I was always a musician and drummer. And in the 90s, I literally stumbled into a coven of witches right here in St. Catharines that were transplanted to the United States. They had a store here in the city called the Ancient Earth. And the proprietors was my then priestess and another elder. And so I spent many years learning that tradition of witchcraft and learning about myself as the magical conduit to the elements and the nature around us.
Wow.
Just so happened that tradition also had a focus on drumming. And so when I would travel with them down to the areas that our tradition was centered out of, which was Texas, big events had tons of drummers around the fire at night. So I gravitated right away to knowing that, this is something I'm familiar with, and I really did that for a few years. And then it was, pushing around the millennium, 2000, that I stumbled into Santeria and voodoo traditions that I came across who needed drummers at the time. And I was happy to provide it, and I had a few other people who were great drummers, and we just started to get shipped around all over parts of northern United States for people that wanted drummers for certain events and public ceremonies, and that's how it began. Eventually, you get initiated if you drum in ceremonies that happen in a little more secretive nature, and my tutelage just began like that in the year 2000.
Wow! So 20 years ago, so you get in this, so you kind of slowly got into it, and then you're invited in, or how does that work?
Yeah, especially after you can provide the type of service, and that's what we call it. Drumming and we'll just say for voodoo for right now is service. It's service you add to help be the foundation of the ceremony. It's to be dancing and people honoring and doing different elements of spirits or actual elevated ancestors. And so some of those ceremonies, they do require drums in other traditions. And so those take place though in a more secretive nature. Those are passage rites and mysteries passed on. So in order to be present in those rooms to provide those drumming, you need to be initiated at that point. And so that's, literally invited in. It's a gauntlet for some. It was a gauntlet. You have to run for a year or two, to make sure that you're going to be worthy and trustworthy. And so, that's literally how I ended up. I never thought I would do anything else but just be a voodoo drummer. But, the fates have different plans, and 20 years later, I spent considerable amounts of time in New Orleans. It's one of the people that I began to follow was Priestess Miriam Tubman of the Orleans Voodoo Spiritual Temple. I met her and the priest at an event, early year 2000, and I knew that I'd found somebody that I was going to be devoted to for most of my life. And here, 20 years later, I'm still devoted to that temple and to Priestess Miriam and her work, which this year, 2020, is Priestess Miriam and the Voodoo Spiritual Temple of New Orleans' 30th anniversary. So she's been on North Rampart Street for 30 years, survived Katrina, a fire, and now still surviving this COVID-19 ordeal. So this is a temple and a person I'm very devoted to, and we're celebrating their 30th year.
Amazing. I believe Bonnie's going to post the name of her temple so people can look up, and so we always have if people want to donate to the artist, and tonight you've decided that if anybody wants to donate, it would go to her temple, correct?
Yeah, she would love that. And they have a donate button right on her website, and anybody wanted to donate a couple of dollars towards the cause to help keep the Voodoo Spiritual Temple's lights on during the COVID transition, it would be very, very cherished and blessed to do so.
Excellent, excellent. And so 20 years ago, so you're initiated. So here's a question. Are you full-time witch doctor, full-time voodoo drummer, spiritual drummer? Yeah. What does a day in the life of Witchdoctor Utu look like when we're not in COVID situation?
Right. Well, in the last few months, there's been a lot of online consultations, interviews, classes, which has been interesting and different, and I've enjoyed it a lot. But in the last, almost 10 years, it's become a full-time lifestyle for me where, if I'm not traveling with my band or with members of the people that I work with here in Niagara, or just people that I work with over on the other side of the river in Buffalo, providing service. My main way that I work as a witch doctor is to help either do divination readings for people through different types of oracle mediums, and then also to help remove negative magic, bad juju. People have it sometimes. They have like an energetic hold, which is what a hex and a curse might do. So we divine that and see if it's true, and then we'll take it away from them. And through divination, we'll find out what a person can do to ensure that their roads are open in life, that they can follow the faith that awaken.
So when would somebody come looking for a witch doctor, and how would somebody find a witch doctor? Well, now we know how to find you, which is great. And is it expensive? I mean, I have so many questions, So I guess just going back, voodoo, witch doctor kind of has this, connotation around it. And I just want to pull up, I wanted to pull up my notes, and now of course I can't find them, but when we spoke earlier, you used 3 words that were so not what I would have pictured to be voodoo and witch doctor. I don't know if it was spirituality, but they were really positive words that you used.
Elevation, empowerment, and healing.
Healing, that's right. So sorry, what were the first 2? So there was healing,
elevation, elevation, and empowerment.
Empowerment, exactly. And so that's beautiful, because all of a sudden, voodoo witchcraft seems quite dark, and then the words you used were the complete opposite, which I loved. And so in what situation would somebody come looking for a witch doctor? We always think of casting spells and voodoo dolls, right? The general public,
So most people that come to me, again, I'm hooked into an entire global community of it in my 20 years. So there's people all over the United States and Canada. There's actual whole communities filled with people that venerate or revere various paths of what we call the African traditional religions. So those are the ones that come to the New World via the slave trade of the Americas. And so those people have to find ways to preserve their ancestral religions, and because the slave masters and the nations that did it were so cruel, they purposely split them all up so they wouldn't speak the same languages. Because of course, Western Africa is cosmopolitan. There's multiple languages, multiple cultures and religions there. So they forced them to have to live amongst themselves and not speak the same languages, have the same religions, but they were able to build foundations of their ancestral religions, their ancestral veneration, and preserve the magic of their homeland. And that's really what voodoo and hoodoo and what we know as Santeria and Palo Mayombe, there's several of these African traditional religions that preserved, and so in amongst all of those religions in various countries, the one in Haiti is different from the one that's preserved in Cuba, which is different from Venezuela, different from Brazil, and ultimately was different in America.
So you said voodoo, hoodoo, Santeria. So I believe that was that Brazil, Santeria.
Santeria is mostly Cuban. Santeria is like a sort of a more palpable term that's used. The tradition is actually called Lokumi, but Santeria, because of the amount of saint, fusion within it, Catholic saint iconography, became known as Santeria, and so some people refer to it as that.
Right, and so then where's voodoo pertains to a particular African country, or because you said voodoo and hoodoo, is it just different countries that have different names for a very similar tradition?
Yeah, the word voodoo it's West African in origin, so that would be in the regions of Nigeria and the Fan people, the tribes of the Fan people. They used that term to describe God, spirit. So the word voodoo has that meaning. It means spirit. It means God, the power. So it has a few meanings. Now, hoodoo in the Americas, that's debated to this day exactly how that euphemism was termed and coined, but it refers more to spell work. Voodoo and some of these African religions, it takes a community, as we say. There's drummers, there's dancers, there's clergy, there's people that participate. Hoodoo is where the Protestants of the Americas were so strict compared to the Catholics against the people that they were enslaving, that they eradicated any ability for people to gather in that situation. So those traditions now became, what was very common in New Orleans, people practicing individually. The magic now being putting spells into bags to carry. But again, it was always usually used, the things you would make, gree bags, mojo bags, were to help you overcome obstacles, help you get through the trials and tribulations. Witchcraft in general, and voodoo and folk magic, is almost always the practices of people that are not, in the highest echelons of society. It's us people still trying to struggle and maintain their roads in life in order to succeed.
Right. So
people
again,
also come to me because I'm in those communities, and mostly for readings. I go around to mainstream psychic fairs too, and facilitate a few stores where that's me. I'm the person doing the readings that day, and mostly I just do that for folks' divination. But then there are ones that literally come recommended because they feel they have an issue, maybe something's been done to them. They just want to get some bad energy off of them so they can move on, and the witch doctor is literally that person who helps remove those things and gets them into the path they need to be on.
Right. So what would a reading involve if I came to you for a reading?
Well, we sit down. I have a series of mats and shells and cards and bones, and we talk for a little bit. Once we make the establishment of the connection, then we lay all this out, divine what's going on. I say what I see, and then I start asking the person what's going on, and then we have a long conversation, and it all starts to make sense. And then we use that even as provides the formula to help aid in what it is that is affecting them. So there's always a remedy, a prescription of sorts, on a spiritual level.
So how long would in general, how long would a reading take?
They take anywhere from half an hour to an hour. It really depends on how. Sometimes it's like, clear my afternoon, it's one of these. It really depends, but mostly an hour. And then if there's more work to be done at that time, then we'll do it.
Right. How much? And I mean, I'm putting you on the spot because it's all new to me, and I just find it fascinating. Can you put a price on that? Like if you're at a fair and you're in your tent or in your booth and you're doing readings, and somebody walks up and says, "I want a reading." Do you have a price tag on that, or is it kind of like?
It varies all the time. It varies at different events. Sometimes, people just pay to do a bunch of them, or they can range from, a 10-minute mini reading, which is very popular for a lot of people. They can be $20. Sometimes a half an hour one can be, $50, $60. And if something's going really well over an hour, it's usually something around $100 maybe. And that's what it usually costs at stores, fairs, things like that. It's when people come to my house, which is what people normally do, we work it out. There's some sort of a framework. We figure out what's going to work out.
Right. So okay, so people come to your house. So here in St. Catharines, if somebody wanted to get a reading, they could come and find you, and you do it from your lovely home there. Looks, you're going to tell us about the room you're in right now, but so they would come to your home to do that then.
Well, right now that I'm back to work, actually, we're doing that out in my backyard. So I have a little deck with some trees, and because I'm not quite bringing people in the house yet. We still are under recommended. The less people I have coming through the doors, the better. So very few people have been through these doors since March, and but now all the work is taking place out in my backyard. So I set it up. Tried to plant some things this year, make it look a little nicer. So now each morning that I have someone out there, I kind of go through the house here and find who wants to come outside, and the house is filled with different statues and effigies that are empowered with spirits, and so we decide who's coming outside to sort of bring a little bit of this outside, so people still get the visitor experience,
For sure. So how long have you been collecting your statues, your effigies, and all of the beautiful pieces you have surrounding you?
Well, yeah, over 20 years for some of them, and hardcore now about 20 years of actively, again, remember, some were given to me, at different times by different people, different lineages I serve. After certain passage rites, things are given to you and you look after them, and then sometimes I do find them and bring them home, and you just never know, how it's going to work. But it's just an organic process that sometimes I do actually stop and look around and go, yeah, it's not fun to move. That's why I try not to as often as possible.
Yeah, I was just on the phone with my sister today, and she was going through her stuff and kind of like paring it down, and that would be hard with all of the objects that you've collected, because each one would have such an attachment and a story to, right?
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So if somebody wanted to become a witch doctor, can anybody become a witch doctor?
Well, I suppose in theory anybody could, but it's not exactly the easiest thing to, again, stumble into. I was already a practitioner in the African traditional religions before I became a witch doctor, and at the time, the title, it seemed kind of interesting to me, but I never really thought at that time I was going to use it as my identifying title. But it's accurate, it's applicable. So I am currently the only white witch doctor in the quote unquote family I belong to, which is a colorful bunch of folks from Kenya, South Africa, Mozambique, Uganda, Nigeria, and then me. Right.
And then that family from all those different countries, are they living in those respective countries, or are most of them in New Orleans, or some of them in Canada?
Most of them are here in Canada. Some do go back and forth between their home countries, being Mozambique or Nigeria. One family does go back once in a while to Kenya. The Ugandans, they never go back. They're not planning on ever going back. But so most of them live in Canada, and again, that's just that doesn't surprise most people that live in Canada, because of it, just especially Ontario, the level of multiculturalism we have here, and just how unique some hidden things are. It's quite interesting. But yeah, most of them are here in Canada.
So that family, so you named certain countries, so there's about 15 to 20 of you in that family of witch doctors, would you say? Or
yeah. And then the name of that particular family, which are from the mother and the father from Mozambique, they belong to a lineage in Mozambique that goes back a very, very long way. So they were the mother and father of an entire other lineage of theirs. So that's how it's passed on. Everybody essentially, you share blood if you're going to be a family member. So that's part of that right, is so, the blood of the family has to be running through my veins in order for me to be able to call upon certain things, right? It's and that's not uncommon. And I'm not saying anything that, most witches or folks in our traditions would be like, they'll recognize that right away. It may sound a little barbaric to others, but these things happen.
The ceremony when you're passing blood type thing.
Yeah,
ish.
For being a witch doctor specifically, because very family oriented. That's how those are. And so if you're going to adopt people, which is what they did, all those people are from different countries, but we're all part of a family. So so everybody quote unquote kind of adopted. So that's the best way to describe it.
So is there, who's the youngest in your particular family?
I guess the youngest would be a gentleman who did move back to Mozambique with his family and came back as fast as possible. So he's 25, 26,
okay.
25.
Right.
Maybe 27 now, but young.
Young. And is there and please forgive me if these are ignorant questions, because it is all new to me, and I'm sure a lot of people listening and watching are also as fascinated as I am. Is there an age limit? Like, what's the youngest somebody could become a witch doctor?
Well, there wouldn't be one specifically. Most families, like in Africa, which is a very giant continent, but the way that works is, the family raises their children. It's a family tradition. So they could be learning from very young, but they wouldn't be actually doing anything until they were, number one, able to really defend themselves, protect themselves, be strong, whether it's a man or a woman. So, that would probably be somebody in their 20s before they would actually embark on taking over. And again, it becomes like a lifelong schooling and tutelage. There's no way to ever truly know everything. And then each person that you honor the lineage, the family, the bloodline, but you're encouraged, because this is how it is, to incorporate your own creativity now into how you apply things to fix issues with people spiritually.
Wow.
So there's a bit of creativity in that. And luckily, I already had been immersed in a lot of witchcraft. So best way to know how to get rid of witchcraft is be a witch. So it's a controversial subject, because witchcraft is that word has a very negative connotation in the entire continent of Africa. And so, but witch doctors always usually do okay. They're not the ones usually persecuted, because they're the ones who remove conditions. But it really depends on what region and what country, just how bad it can be. But unfortunately, people are still persecuted very cruelly in India and in Africa. It's so you got to be careful. People have to be careful what they say over there.
Oh, interesting. So witch is not looked upon as good, but witch doctor, you're fixing.
That's right.
Things. Oh, okay, very interesting. So listen, I know that our co-creator Peter Shea was trying to get a hold of me, and I think he might want to jump in with a few questions, so I'm going to check in. And while we do that, I'm going to play a couple of promo videos, and also I'd like to bring up one of your dragon ritual drumming videos. So we're going to play that, and then talk a little bit about the ceremonies and the drumming and all of that after this. Are you okay with that?
You got it.
Excellent. This is fascinating. Thanks so much for joining us. So if you're just tuning in, we've got Witchdoctor Utu with us live here from St. Catharines in the Niagara region in Ontario, Canada. We're going to play a couple of promo clips, and then we're going to come back and hear him with his group doing some drumming and talk some more. So here's our promo video these are our Niagara Summer Mardi Gras sessions. We started in May. This is session number 8. We have one more next week, and you can go back and watch them on our Facebook or YouTube channel to get you ready for the spirit of Mardi Gras, Niagara Summer Mardi Gras, which will be next Saturday, July 18th. So here's a little bit more.
The TD Niagara Jazz Festival presents Niagara Summer Mardi Gras Sessions. Join us online every Tuesday from 6 to 7 p.m. as we bring new Orleans to the north. Direct from the Crescent City, Dancin' Man 504, Windex Pete, Christopher Butcher of the Heavyweights Brass Band, and more. Featuring mask making, Cajun cooking demos, musical spoons, second line dance steps, cocktail demos, funky fashion tips, and musical clips. Tune in for these free sessions on our Facebook or YouTube channels, Jazz Niagara. Then we'll celebrate Niagara Summer Mardi Gras together this summer on July 18th. It's virtually possible. Just watch and see.
Niagara's Summer Mardi Gras sessions are brought to you in part by TD, the City of St. Catharines, and the town of Niagara-on-the-Lake.
So if you're just joining us this evening, we have Witchdoctor Utu telling us about his life as a witch doctor and stories about voodoo and the culture of New Orleans and St. Catharines. New Orleans and the Underground Railroad and the trip to the city of St. Catharines with Mama Moses, Harriet Tubman. And I'm just about to pull up one of his videos, so bear with me for a second. I see that there has been a few comments come in, so let me just see here. Oh, Bonnie, I'm going to just talking to Bonnie, who's backstage, and I'm just seeing now that there had been an echo, so I'm hoping that the echo is gone. I just saw some comments there. So if I'm actually going to post just quickly a banner that I didn't post earlier for everyone in terms of the sound during the show. So let me just pull that up for you guys, because sometimes there's things happening on the other end. So let me put this up for you. Okay, so hopefully that solved a few issues, and we're going to play one of Utu's videos for you right now. Tell us about that. Utu, tell us about Bambula. Tell us about your dragon ritual drummers. Tell us everything.
I have not watched that video in a while, but yeah, that makes me think of a really good times making it. So that video it's a great segue to New Orleans because that's shot all on location over a course of different times, and it's telling a story of a lodge of drummers. This is part of the culture in New Orleans, a part of on Mardi Gras Day of various people that dress themselves in skeletal attire and come through certain neighborhoods early in the morning with the drums to, ward off bad magic, get money given to them in order to it's a good luck. It's just part of the culture. One of the most famous ones is called Skull and Bones Gang, and one of the drummers I've met, who is a great friend of the temple in New Orleans, Sun Pai, he's the leader of that particular crew. And so that story was telling one that's somewhere lost in time, where one of the leaders was resurrected from, came out from the spirit that came out of the grave, literally, and reenacted what he always did. And then at the end, it's just kind of showing us coming out of the swamp, because eventually that's one of our most famous rhythms we play, usually at the end of every concert. The rhythm Bambula comes from Congo Square in New Orleans. And it's a type of a rhythm. Now that's our rendition of it. We kind of raise up the tempo and excitement of it a little bit. But yeah, the rhythm honors not only the ancestors of the particular people that were, gathering in Congo Square, but also now has become an anthem to venerate the ancestors of New Orleans voodoo and New Orleans voodoo drummers in general over all these decades. So it becomes this way for everybody to at a concert or at a ceremony to all, no matter where you come from, no matter what your culture or race is, if you're in this circle at the time the ceremony begins, then you're a member that night of that particular ceremony. And that's the moment during Bambula where we all honor all of our individual ancestors. And so we invite our ancestors to the party and let them see that we're living life really well, because we're now in moments of drums and dancing and being ecstatic. We're truly living at a beautiful moment at that time. So that's the rhythm that we play to honor not only New Orleans voodoo, but the ancestors of the New Orleans voodoo practitioners, be it Marie Laveau or Dr. John Montanet, the two most well-known figures of New Orleans voodoo in the 1800s, but then all of the voodoo queens and drummers, and then everybody's ancestors. The rhythm is a big celebratory rhythm. And to us, it was important to play it. First off, it is a part of the New Orleans Voodoo Spiritual Temple's drum order of service, we call it, but also because it's a way to really hone in on the fact that Congo Square, that section of New Orleans, is probably one of the most, I would say, sacred places in America when it comes to music. So Congo Square was at one point something akin to a farmer's market. And to get the sense of what it was all about in there, one thing, again, to remind people is, the level of cruelty that the slavery of the South was, the people who were enslaved, they had to grow their own food. They weren't being fed. So, this part of New Orleans was interesting because there was free people of color from other parts of the world, or that had become freed from their condition of slavery for whatever reasons, bought their freedom or was given to them. So New Orleans is always a very multicultural, interracial city, which confounded the Americans when they took over it, because to them this was just like the most horrendous thing that they could ever imagine. The people of all these different colors and races were all intermarrying, interconnecting with their different weird religions and cultures, and it was just too European, too cosmopolitan. Americans actually tried to, eradicate whatever they could in that city at every chance, but New Orleans is a survivor city. So the Congo Square is where the enslaved on a Sunday who could get that time off, free people of color, and then indentured servants all came together in that area. And it was basically to exchange food. Some people could grow some things, some people could grow others, whatever it was a commerce and interconnection. And so what was famous was in the African section of that square was drumming. And there would be ceremonies. This was the time for everyone to dance and to celebrate, and also not just celebrate and dance. What I mean is pass codes on. When they danced with machetes, it kind of was signaling to people that there was going to be an uprising. And they don't really focus on a lot of the uprisings in America, unfortunately. And in Louisiana, there were a couple of renowned ones where the enslaved rose up and did, cause some damage. And rightly so. But at some point, also the indentured servants of the city were at one point predominantly Irish. And so on the other side of Congo Square, there they were with their fiddles, and they were playing fiddle music. And so every musician knows, and if only we could know who it was, but one day, at some point in Congo Square, one of these two cultures collided, the fiddle, the drum, they jammed, they invited other people over, and that began to happen regularly to the point where that is the birthplace of jazz. That's why it's called Louis Armstrong Square now, but at Congo Square, there's two sections of it. So jazz was born there. The combination of African polyrhythms of the drums and whatever you call those scales that the Irish were playing, these two things could only have happened in America. It didn't happen in other places where these various cultures did enslave or colonize. It just happened there that somehow that became the basis of what would now be known as that 4/4 time that gave birth to jazz. And jazz gives birth to rhythm and blues throughout the South and country music, which all ends up giving birth to rock and roll. And, rock and roll wasn't just, entertaining. It changed the world. It was the backbone behind a movement, much like we're seeing now with Black Lives Matter in the 60s. The jazz was also the one pushing the envelope for a long time, and just the music of America, which is the fusion of European and African rhythm and melody, comes together, is, despite a lot of terrible things that happen in America, the fact that jazz was born in New Orleans and that what gave birth to the rhythm and blues and rock and roll, to me, is probably one of the most significant musical things that's happened in the history of humanity. Because at least up to this point, it's the pop culture of the world is based upon rock and roll out of America, and that only is available and possible because it was birthed in Congo Square in New Orleans. And that's why when we drum sometimes or connect to the spirits of New Orleans, musicians and voodoo queens, it's even a spiritual or a mental pilgrimage and a mecca to venerate and honor a location that changed the entire world through the worst conditions that people were forced to live in. That somehow something that we celebrate the most in the world of music was born in that square, and that's why it's sacred. I think it's one of the most sacred places in America.
Absolutely. So you've obviously been to Congo Square on many occasions.
Yeah. Some of that video is shot in Congo Square. Every time I'm in New Orleans, I will go to Congo Square as many times as possible. Thankfully, it's right on the other side of North Rampart, where the Voodoo Spiritual Temple is.
Oh, that's where it is. Okay.
Very close. Very close, yeah. So it's right in the Treme. Friends of mine live in the Treme. So when I'm there, I'm usually staying at either Priestess Miriam's house or my friend's house in the Treme. I've never stayed in a hotel in New Orleans in all my life, actually. But so Congo Square is like a place that we visit all the times. And there's still a corps of drummers in Congo Square every Sunday called the Bambula 2000, and Luther Gray is the name of the old gentleman, old black man, who has been a stalwart, preservation of the djembe and the type of drums we use. Every Sunday in Congo Square, he holds a circle. It's been going for 30 years, and the priest of our temple was a member of it. And when our whole band was down in New Orleans a couple of years ago, we had that Sunday off, and that was our biggest thing, was to get in there and say, "Hey, Luther, it's us, it's Dragon Ritual Drummers," and for us to drum with those guys that day, and they heard our version of Bambula, and they're like, "Whoa, that's pretty upbeat, right?" And so it's kind of like a different version. Everyone plays a little bit, but so that's the heartbeat of New Orleans when it comes to religion and music. Congo Square is a sacred place.
Very sacred. Yeah, I got to go there myself. I've been to New Orleans just once last April. And we were staying with our friend Christopher Butcher, who also lives in the Treme. And so it was just a hop, skip, and a jump. And there's a very large tree, so I'm not sure on which side of it is. And I just kind of, it's like a huge tree. And I think there's a plaque on it. And I remember just standing there thinking, wow, what this tree has seen over the years, right? Because it's probably at least 150 years old or more. And then, so in terms of joining a drum circle, so are there any rules to that, or anybody can show up with a drum, and is it quite inclusive?
In New Orleans, the one in Congo Square?
Yeah.
I think as long as you are, there's an etiquette in drum circles depending on who's holding them. Now, I know who Luther Gray is. He's a drum elder of the city, and Bambula 2000 are legends, at least to some people in the drumming culture.
Yeah.
So when you approach their drum circle, you do it with respect. Like, you're not trying to overpower them, and how loud you play. And that's usually the case for most drum circles, you know.
Yeah.
But they are very inclusive. They have a barbecue going there. They do that to basically keep one aspect of New Orleans culture going, which is drumming in the French Quarter, whether it be in Congo Square or a couple of different courtyards. For as long as there's drums happening like that, it's kind of like the heartbeat of New Orleans, at least the less known heartbeat of it, because the city celebrates so much of its jazz, commercial, crossover
Hmm.
atmosphere. But the underlying part of all of that is the African religions, which were what the drums were representing. So, even the Underground Railroad, like nobody likes to talk about the fact that Harriet Tubman was a conjure woman as well as a spiritual, devout Christian. You know, they don't want to talk about how much voodoo and what type of root work and spell work it took for the average person to make that journey from Louisiana to where we live here in Niagara region. That took over a year of being pursued, hungry, you know, sick, you know, always on the run. That took a lot of perseverance, and the magic that they would channel was not just Christianity. So, you know, that's just not something people want to talk about. But that's really the truth of, you know, what I really believe is that not only is rock and roll a paramount part of America and is really the signature of its culture, but so is voodoo. You can't separate them, even into the mythos of the rhythm and blues players of the early 1900s, you know, doing ceremonies at crossroads and learning to play their guitar in graveyards at night. You know, there was a lot of mysticism amongst all those traveling musicians in the juke joints. You know, all the guys who were playing the early rhythm and blues, all those songs, you listen to them, they're just filled with black cat bone and juju and root work. Like all those songs are about, you know, that the traveling gangster musicians at the time, they were all conjure men. They carried mojos, they carried grigris, and they used them to get laid, get hired, and get away from the police so that they get out of town, and ultimately also to evade and avoid the police. Some things have never changed in the South. You know, it's never been good to be a black man in America, and so a lot of spells come down to that. You know, to avoid the police, and that all came from, you know, hiding from bounty hunters on the Underground Railroad. So all of the voodoo of America is in a place of trying to reach, you know, freedom, you know, attain freedom by any means that you can. And of course you would enlist magic and spirituality if you could. You go to church on one day and go to the conjure woman on the other. Like it's a necessary, and it's always been a way that I can't say all of them, but, you know, that's a big part of the black experience in America, those two worlds. And so, you know, when someone like me ends up in there, I find it fascinating to be a part of it. And, you know, for me, that's the Underground Railroad, is that easy gateway for me. It's a way to connect where I live at the end of the Underground Railroad, where Harriet Tubman lived and brought her track to its end. And I'm friends with many descendants of freedom seekers here in the city. And so those are, to me, great heroes. And it's not uncommon in voodoo and root work and these other African traditional religions to pick heroic figures and help elevate them to a higher consciousness, to be this is work that a lot of us try to do or could only hope to ever be, is when you pass on to be revered in that level. So it's not that strange to revere Harriet Tubman, John Brown, Frederick Douglass, the ones that we know the names of at least, and see them for what they were, freedom fighters who collaborated. You know, when you think about it, Harriet Tubman was born and raised a slave and treated horribly most of her life until she escaped, treated horribly by white people. And then later in life, as the Underground Railroad conductor, befriended as confidants white men and women that were, you know, she trusted with her life. So that arc of her journey as a human is very inspiring. And the fact that it was Canadians and Americans, rich, poor, white, black, Christian, Jew, and other, that all somehow worked together in real progressive way to fight slavery. I think that's always an inspiration, especially nowadays when we look at the conditions around us, that, you know, it's hard, it seems, for people to unite for the same cause. And I think the Underground Railroad is a great inspiration to remind us of, you know, just how it can be done and for the right reasons. So to me, the Underground Railroad is a unique spiritual paradigm to draw inspiration and power from, because it's always about attaining freedom and honoring those who were the ones brave enough to fight the system.
Yeah. And so when you moved here to St. Catharines to go to Brock, did you know about that connection before coming? Is that part of what made
Not
you
before
stay here?
coming, but within the first few days that I lived in St. Catharines with my friend that moved away from me from Toronto, we attended a very it was like about 80% Jamaican Caribbean high school, right? So when we came here, we kind of laughed. We were living right on the block because he's like, "Hey, did you know that right around the corner? This was like," and I was like, "Oh, well, I guess, just keeping it real, like we're our home school." Like we joked around, that how ironic, we come from the blackest high school in Toronto to end up living in that neighborhood. So I always knew it was there, but did not ever think about it on a spiritual way. I've never lived very far from that church, the specific one, the British Methodist Episcopalian Church. And it wasn't until around 2001 that I was already a member of the Voodoo Spiritual Temple, being attentive, trying to travel back and forth. And when they were presenting somewhere, showing up, it was their members of that temple that said, you should focus on the voodoo of Niagara to keep you, busy up there when you can't be down here. And I was like, what voodoo in Niagara? And they were like, Harriet Tubman, right? And so, this is, again, there'll be, not everyone had the internet just yet. So it's not like everyone could just Google these things. And I'm like, there really was no connection for me at that moment. I didn't know that these things, this was even something to consider. So I went around the corner and thought about it. And it just began this journey, the spiritual work of working with the spirits of those who have been forgotten mostly. There are a lot of people that fought for their freedom and made their freedom journey all the way from the South through all these conditions that come to Canada and then eventually be buried, and then for those graveyards to be turned into parking lots, which we have that here in St. Catharines. And so those are places I always go to give offerings, to connect with those spirits and remember them and honor them and give them a place to try to guide them. Like, to me, it's very sad and tragic. So that's been the whole mission, is to elevate those spirits, remember them, give them sustenance and illumination, and then in turn to help them join into a larger, more illuminated spirit world that can help humans that want to achieve their fates in life.
Yeah, very nice, very nice. Speaking of cemeteries, I know that Bonnie made a comment. She was talking about in New Orleans all of the above ground cemeteries, and often seeing ritual offerings there. We think, not sure. Do you know anything about that?
Yep.
What's happening in the graveyards?
I'm looking at that comment now. Yeah. So the most famous one, of course, is St. Louis Cemetery number 1, which is right there on just in the Treme essentially as well, kind of behind in there. Yeah, that's where the tomb for Marie Laveau is, the voodoo queen Marie Laveau. And so people go there and leave offerings and ask for good luck. It's unfortunately, everybody has been notoriously putting X's on that tomb, but that really does damage it. And so people, that's part of the culture in the city. Shortly after Marie Laveau died in the late 1800s, she was automatically revered as a elevated spirit. To this day, people through that all that time, her tomb has been visited. People have left money, perfume, all kinds of nature of things that her spirit would like, and they ask for her protection. And she's almost the matron saint of the city of New Orleans, at least the voodoo one. And so that's what people do that for. There's many tombs, and it's not uncommon. Even here in Ontario, you'll find certain graves and places where what's going on here, because people will leave offerings at various graves to ask for a blessing from specific spirits that had a certain skill, So that's a practice of that, and so people leave those offerings for Marie Laveau. That's the most famous one. That's just usually surrounded by them, and that's the thing. Marie Laveau, the voodoo queen of New Orleans, one of the most underrated parts of her legacy is she did help people escape through the Underground Railroad. So she notoriously, people say she owned slaves. She did own a few slaves in order to not have those people fall in the hands of people who are going to, she bought them. She had money at times, kept them in her house safe, and helped them escape. And so a very famous other Underground Railroad woman, Mary Ellen Pleasant, Mistress Mary Ellen Pleasant, who was considered, she's known as, Black City Hall, the queen of civil rights, the mother of civil rights in California. She lived in New Orleans for a little while and did tutelage with Marie Laveau, and the two of them did hatch out that the Underground Railroad famously ends in Ontario in Windsor and St. Catharines, but they orchestrated a whole track that went out to California. And so Mary Ellen Pleasant is an underrated figure too. But that's a part of New Orleans that people don't think a lot of, is that there were abolitionists there because of the city's ability to be filled with free people of color and people from all over the world. Spies and agents could get in there no problem and orchestrate a lot of money and intelligence so people could get out of the city heading towards Baton Rouge and as far north as possible. So that is a big part of New Orleans legacy as well. It was a great, and many people that fled from New Orleans ended up right here in St. Catharines. In the slave narratives, their names are preserved. They said their names. They, descendants, some of them still live in St. Catharines, It's amazing.
Wow. So tell us, you know so much about the subject. I could just talk for hours with you and just listen. Tell us about your book.
Well, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I just happen to have one.
Of course, nice.
So you can buy this book on Amazon, or I think there's still some in various chapters stores in anywhere, but you can get it on Amazon. It's called Conjuring Harriet, Mama Moses Tubman, and the Spirits of the Underground Railroad. So it's a combination of histories that no history book's ever going to touch, especially in particular ways that magic was a part of the Underground Railroad, and who some of these figures were that were involved in all kinds of forms of mysticism or even atheism. But they, the abolitionists were a very, very progressive. Spiritualism was born out of that culture of abolitionists in the North. And so it's a combination of histories, ways to revere Harriet Tubman, John Brown. There's many historic figures in there that worked together. They all knew each other. And then there's all sorts of formulas and basic hoodoo and root work, spell work. There's that is in there, but it's all on the arc of drawing from the Underground Railroad. Because it's to me, again, it's got everything that you want: freedom fighters, holy people, hands-on preachers. Like, it's just so many colorful figures in that world that work together. That that's what my book is all about. It's just about how to reach out to some of these historic figures in a spiritual way, which most Catholics would find familiar when it comes to folk saints. Or African traditional religion practitioners will see it as including these people as ancestors of humanity. So it's a combination of history and hands-on root work and voodoo with lots of instructions on how anyone can do it while not hurting yourself or getting yourself in any trouble.
Oh, that's good. No pain is good. When did you write the book, Utu?
Just 2 years ago. A year and a half ago.
Excellent. So we'll post the book there for everyone to see. Bonnie's giving me a thumbs up, and I know that we actually found there is a copy. I was trying to pick up my own copy on my way to Hamilton. I think it was in the Grimsby chapters.
Oh, really? Is that in there?
Yeah, I think it was Grimsby. Oh no, Stony Creek. Okay. Yeah, Stony Creek. So I better get there before somebody else does.
If not, you can get it on Amazon.
Okay, perfect. I was trying to get it quicker. But oh wow, I mean, it's just been so great speaking with you, learning so much about voodoo and witchcraft. One last little question: voodoo dolls, because when we hear about voodoo, everybody's like voodoo dolls, and when you go to New Orleans, you can buy them in the souvenir shops. Tell us a little bit about maybe the tourist version of voodoo dolls and the real deal.
Well, I actually happen to have a voodoo doll. Lots of them right here.
I thought you just might.
So I'll show you one here.
Okay.
Look at this little guy.
Yeah.
Now, this is one I made. Actually, funny enough, I teach a class in a workshop on making them. We make these particular kinds. We make them. I bring all the material. We make them. Here's one from New Orleans that a lot of people will recognize. This little fellow here.
Yeah.
Right. Now, the voodoo doll is a combination of not only African wooden fetish work, but it also is because of the indentured servants, predominantly British, Irish, who use puppets in their work, like little figurines shaped in human shapes for healing. And so, a lot of indentured servants and the enslaved or free people of color intermarried in the South, especially in New Orleans and in the Caribbean. And so that's how the voodoo doll, as we know it, kind of became what it was. And so it's never, I have so many of them here. I teach a little class on it. One of my good friends, Denise Alvarado, has written a book called The Voodoo Doll Spell Book. So it's a subject I'm really well versed in. So I can say with a lot of confidence, next to never does anyone that I know, and I know the most feared, respected, and loathed of all voodoo practitioners on this continent, no one stabs them with pins. That's all just
Okay.
mythology. But what they do use them for, so when I have this guy, there's lots of them, they go above your door. If you can now personalize the voodoo doll, I'm trying to get it in, here we go. If you can personalize the voodoo doll with certain things of yours and say certain prayers and place it above a doorway in your home, they're meant to ward off negativity. And in a New Orleans culture, the voodoo dolls, most likely in the neighborhoods that use them, always you'll find them above doorways and usually with a broom. A broom also goes above the door to sweep away negativity. And so, it's not uncommon to see both. So that's what the voodoo doll is for. Some people will still use puppets for healing, but you'll take it and put something of the person on it and use that as a device to use for healing. But that's still not even all that common in any of my contemporaries. We almost always, for those that use them, it's not a very common practice, but I certainly know the people that use them, and I use them considerably. It's for protection, to put above your door, your window, to ward off bad juju from the house. And that's essentially all they're for, and that's what they're very effective for. And so that's the last, stigma that people, but sticking them in pins in them, I suppose you could, but why waste a good doll when you're going to wreck it? Like, these things are not easy. They're pretty. They're cool looking. I'm not going to ruin them by shredding it. You can just do that with someone. If you really want to get at somebody in a text, you just got to have their photo and a piece of their
clothing or
something of theirs, and you don't even need it all, but that's for another time.
so and so again, this kind of preconceived conception of what a voodoo doll is, the negativity, we're actually not at all, and hurting somebody else when actually you're taking pieces of your jewelry or clothing and you're using it for protection. So again, thank you for demystifying that for us.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's always somebody that uses them for different reasons, but that is really truly the idea of what they are, and it's almost exclusively a New Orleans legacy that's survived. And some people say, oh, they never had any history in the city, they're just tourist things. But and if that is true, over the last 60 to 70 years, they've become what they are, which is a fetish to ward off negativity of your door. They work good.
Wow. So do you have a workshop coming up anytime soon?
Well, it's
I know it's tricky with
hard
COVID.
to say because we need be able to gather more than 5 to 10 people. But anyone that just if you just come to my Facebook page, it's wide open. Everything I post is public. Then I always post what I'm doing. If I'm going to have a class coming up, and it's a fun one. The voodoo doll one is fun. Everyone gets to take one home.
That's pretty cool.
We make it and find out why we use all the materials, why those things were used, and so it's fun. It's a good one.
I think that's fascinating. So well, I'd like to say that we'd definitely love to have you back again. This is all new for us doing these sessions, of course, because we're used to doing live events and live workshops. But this is really great too, and just interviewing you and learning about voodoo and the culture of New Orleans is just incredible. So thank you, and hopefully we can get your Dragon Ritual drummers in on the festival as well for our
that'd be great
for Mardi Gras. That would be really nice. So maybe, I don't know if we can pull it off this year, but we might be able to try and get you guys to come out at a distance and do a couple of tunes. That would be Bambula would be nice.
I'll ask the guys.
Ask the guys. And actually, just on that, just one last note about the drummers. So the Dragon Ritual drummers, how many of you are there?
Well, there's 5 members of the core unit, but we have about another 3 members that are we actually refer to them as our second line because we have guys that can't travel. Everybody's got jobs now. We used to tour pretty hard back in the day. We did, but we don't anymore. So we're very selective of where we go. But that way, if somebody can't come, then we draw from the other members, and we all know each other in another sort of a lodge. So it's easy. So we have the chemistry. So quite often people are always wondering, what combination are we going to see this time? So
nice.
There's anywhere between 4 to 5 to 8. That's
okay. And all based here in Niagara, the drummers, or
The
different places?
core is, yeah, between Niagara Falls and St. Catharines. The core of us are all here. A
Nice.
couple of the other ones are like in Toronto, and yeah, there are 3 other members that are sort of Toronto based, and we see once in a while.
Fantastic. Okay, so we're going to work on bringing in maybe 3, 4.
Or we can do the show
5
with
of you.
5 and 4 guys. We do it all the time.
Perfect. Okay, excellent. So, Witchdoctor Utu, Dragon Ritual Drummers, thank you so much for joining us. What a treat! Like,
My pleasure, and way to go for you guys to be able to adapt and throw together your festival like this. I've now gotten to watch some of it, and what a great job! So you guys are doing great.
Thank you. Well, I'm just so thrilled. I see Bonnie clapping backstage. Yeah, I'm just so thrilled. You're here too, local. This is great, and thanks to Trisha for connecting us. And yeah, what a great new relationship. We're really thrilled to get to know you and get to share your wisdom with everyone, because I know voodoo and witchcraft is not something you talk about every day.
No, I know. And
Right,
I really appreciate you guys being so open and inclusive to talk about it. So it really shows. I'm really happy, and you know, at the end of the day, it's hard to talk about New Orleans without having some conversation about voodoo in there, and so it's okay to. And so once again, if anybody can ever visit the Voodoo Spiritual Temple on 1428 North Rampart Street, Priestess Miriam will be happy to see you. And she's a great reader and a great lady, a historic Black woman of considerable unique talents and charm. So anyone that can, please visit her. She'll love to see you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Next time I go, that'll be one of my first stops for sure. Well, thanks again, Utu, for joining us, and have a lovely evening. We'll see what we can do, conjure up for Mardi Gras on the 18th with you and the Ritual Drummers, because that would be a really nice touch to have you guys, kind of kick off some of the evening. That would be really, really lovely. So thanks again. I'll join you backstage in just a second. I'm going to play a couple of promo videos. I see there's some comments too. I hope they weren't about bad sound on my part. I think I figured it out. It was my not having the earphones in, but Bonnie was regulating that, so that's good. I'll post some of the comments, and I will play a couple of videos, and I'll see you backstage. Thanks again.
Okay. All the best.
You too. Bye. So once again, that was Witchdoctor Utu coming to you here live from St. Catharines in the Niagara region in Ontario, talking about voodoo and being a witch doctor, and New Orleans and the Underground Railroad, ending up here in St. Catharines with Mama Moses, Harriet Tubman. So much information, and his passion. I could talk to him or listen to him and talk with him for hours. Just fantastic. So I'm just seeing if I can pose. Oh yeah, so here's a couple from Babs. This is so interesting. Beth Ellis in BC, I know she's watching. Very interesting and fascinating. Oh, and here we go. You can pick up a copy, so Bonnie's posted that for us, of Witchdoctor Utu's book on Amazon.ca. And so there's the link for everyone. And yeah, thanks again for joining us. I'm going to pull up a couple of, what day is it today? So we've got Tuesday. Of course, our Mardi Gras sessions are on Tuesday. We have one more next Tuesday with Davis Rogan from New Orleans doing cocktails. And I might even have a video of his loaded up. I'm going to check in back here. I'm going to check for that. In the meantime, I don't think I see it right there, but I'm going to play for you a little clip of the vaudevillian, who's also going to be joining us at Mardi Gras. So please enjoy.
My name is Davis Roden, DJ Davis, and I would like to invite you to the Niagara Summer Mardi Gras, session number 8. Bonjour, je m'appelle Davis. J'aimerais t'inviter à la fête du Mardi Gras à l'été, numéro 8, New Orleans Cocktails with Davis and Stephanie Rogan. C'est le cocktail de la Nouvelle-Orléans avec Davis et Stephanie Rogan. It's going to be happening live at 5 p.m. here in Central Time or 6 p.m. on the East Coast. That's 17h à la Nouvelle-Orléans and 18h where y'all are. And this is going to be broadcast on Facebook Live for Jazz Niagara. Jazz Niagara /live. That's going to be the 14th of July. So, encore une fois, c'est le 14 de Juillet, 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. over there on the East Coast. Hope to catch y'all there. Ciao. Au revoir. Merci.